Hello everybody, my name is Dratnos, and in today's video we're going to take a look at the War Within alpha notes that have just come out, as they do every Thursday. We have new zones, Azkahet now up on the testing, along with City of Threads and Arakara, the last two dungeons of the 8 initial War Within dungeons will be available for testing. I'll try and get those done, get videos up on them over the next couple of days. We'll see if I'm able to do that or not. We also have the new Battleground coming out, Deep Hall Ravine, which is a 8v8, 10v10 battle. I guess they're kind of doing some stuff with all Battlegrounds, changing the sizing. I think they're making it 8/8s, I think the new number for that. Though that might be fake news, I don't know. I knew there was stuff happening with Battlegrounds. I don't really engage too much with that part of the game, so not something I know too much about. But if you're interested, it's now on alpha as well. I guess there's a small chance I might do one just to make a video about it, but I don't know. Maybe you'll have to find that content somewhere else. We also have some warbands updates here. Roughly 2,000 achievements from Dragonflight and earlier have been switched from character-specific to account-wide in order to allow your entire warband to make progress on them. Please note, based on the quirks of implementation, any incomplete achievements that were converted will lose all progress on alpha with this change. In the live game, these achievements will go through a conversion process, which will either merge progress or take the furthest progress in cases where merging wouldn't make sense. This is something they've already said they were planning on doing, and they're just saying, look, the way that we're doing it on alpha now that we've figured out how to do this, we don't want to do this a pass of like running through all your characters and doing this merging, so we're just going to do it this kind of easy way of making people lose all progress on alpha, because that doesn't matter. But once it does go live, I think they've said, hey, there may in fact be a minute or something when you log in the first time after this where it is running this process and going through all your achievements on all your characters and either merging or giving you the farthest progress from each character. We also have the character level template being updated, and earthen characters have been temporarily disabled as well. Don't know what happened with them, but yeah. We have classes, a lot of classes coming in here, a lot of class stuff. First of all, we have a hero talent tree. Enhancements, first hero talent tree is now available, and I believe now the final spec to get their first hero talent tree has been given one on the alpha. So this is Stormbringer, which is all about harnessing the storms, increasing the power of lightning spells, and gaining access to a new lightning ability, Tempest. So this is one of the rare hero talent trees that gives a new ability. We will have a video up on the channel. I don't say this is a one-man operation. I will have a video up on the channel at some point in the next couple days about Stormbringer as well. So if you're interested in seeing a little bit of that, make sure you check for those. Death Knight. We have a bunch of changes coming to DK, I think focusing primarily on Unholy and the class tree here. So we have some new talents. Subduing Grasp says, when you pull an enemy, the damage they deal to you is reduced by 4% for 6 seconds, located at Rune Mastery's previous location. Now, this sort of effect is a little bit sketchy because a lot of enemies that are the most scary, even in like M+, where a lot of enemies are actually CCable, the scariest ones are often the mini-bosses or whatever, the bosses that can't be pulled, right? In some M+ cases, this could be a nice little defensive benefit. In Raid, it's almost never going to matter. In Raid, almost none of the damage that you're worried about comes from enemies that can be pulled. And I'm talking from a tank perspective as well here. From a DPS perspective, that's almost entirely a nothing talent here. Especially at the 4% number, that's just such a low number that you're unlikely to really want to try and use this actively. And you're also unlikely to be getting much passive benefit out of it. Maybe something that'll be somewhat useful in like PvP. Osmosis, anti-magic shell increases healing received by 15 or 25%. Also not a particularly important type of effect. Healing received increases tend to be less powerful than other sorts of defensive bonuses. It's not nothing, but yeah, it's close. Null magic here says magic damage taken is reduced by 15%. That's a large thing. And the duration of harmful magic effects against you are reduced by 35%. That's an interesting thing. This line of text has existed on like Arcane Mage's barrier and has has caused some mechanics to behave in weird ways in the past. So they've had to like whitelist some mechanics to make sure that they don't actually get affected by this if it would be negative for them to be. But yeah, that is certainly something. Certainly a very powerful defensive node. And this is a capstone choice node with Vestigial Shell, which is the next new talent, and it's replacing Soul Reaper. Vestigial Shell instead says casting AMS grants 2 nearby allies a lesser anti-magic shell that absorbs magic damage and reduces the duration of harmful magic effects against them by 50%, and it's a new capstone choice with null magic. So, I mean, null magic is an incredibly powerful passive magic DR. Blood Death Knight tends to not need magic DR. It's sometimes nice. Like, there will be fights where you would take this and you'd be happy. Broodkeeper Diurna, for instance, that would be good. There would be dungeons as well where you'd take this and just be getting some good value. But I think Blood DK, you'd be looking at the utility from Vestigial Shell and being like, wow, I have, now a nice group button that will help save my friends. Whereas DPS DK, I think, on the other hand, you're much more likely to be looking at null magic and be like, okay, this magic damage reduction is going to be nice for, because magic damage is a much higher percentage of the incoming damage taken by DPS classes than it is for tanks generally. And also, you're not just death striking a bunch for free anyways, and healing up all the magic damage you take. So I think that would be my early guess for how this plays out, is that Blood DK would tend to bias towards Vestigial Shell, DPS DKs towards null magic, but I don't know. Ice Prison says Chains of Ice now roots enemies in place for 4 seconds, but its cooldown is increased to 12 seconds, and it's available in Gate 1 after Blinding Sleet. So, depending on the situation, this could be useful, but probably not something you would actually really choose. Like, there are niche M+ cases where you use effects like Mass Root, like Landslide, where you get value out of them, but those cases are almost all places where you're getting a root for much longer than 4 seconds. A 4-second root, it's tough to imagine you'd get much use out of this in PvE. Maybe there's some cases, but I don't think so. Rune Protection says your chance to be crit is reduced by 3%, and your armor is increased by 6% if you take 2 points in this. Looks like the chance to be crit reduction is not getting increased with the second point, and this replaces Icy Talon's old position within the tree. Okay. Armor increase is huge for Blood DK. That is a massive 2 points that you're definitely going to be taking. For other DPS DK specs, probably kind of whatever. Being crit is something that can happen to you if you randomly get aggro or something, but that's not a situation you really want to be setting up for. And armor is also pretty negligible. You have a lot of armor as a plate wearer already compared to a lot of other DPS specs, so raid damage that is reduced by armor is already usually pretty safe for DPS DKs. And then, of course, auto attacks, something you're trying to avoid taking, but maybe a powerful PvP option. Chains of Ice and Anti-Magic Shell are now baseline, plus talent points there. Rune of the Stone-Skinned Gargoyle can now be rune forged on one-handed weapons. Rune of Hysteria has been removed. It was a problematic design, especially as it pertains to Breath of Sindragosa and uptime volatility. We felt for the overall health of the spec, it would be best to remove Hysteria at this time to better enable us to meet our goals with the upcoming changes to Breath. Empower Rune Weapon has been removed. This will still be available for Frost in their spec tree, but both Blood and Unholy were often flooded with resources, and a big unnecessary contributor to this was Empower Rune Weapon. To better dial in resources on Blood and Unholy, we feel it's best to keep Empower Rune Weapon for Frost only. A-Bomb Limb no longer grants Bone Shield, Runic Corruption, or Rhyme based on the spec. In Shadowlands, it was important for the spec hooks to exist to better balance between the other Covenant ability choices. With its reintroduction in Dragonflight, it added to the influx of resources and procs that can often come at inopportune times or add to the feeling of being unable to spend down the bonuses it grants. By removing this, it allows the ability to breathe on its own and lean into its strength of AoE control and damage. Yeah, I mean, I guess this makes sense. It was kind of nice going into a pull as a Blood DK and just pressing A-Bomb Limb and knowing you weren't going to have to press, Mirror End or whatever on that pull. Although usually you'd also have Rune Weapon, but then you would spend the charges from Rune Weapon on a tombstone, so I don't know. I mean, I guess if it's a pull where you're Rune Weaponing, you still just press one Mirror End, you've got all your Bone Shields. I guess this kind of makes sense. Yeah, I mean, it's always kind of, as somebody who plays one of these classes, right, you're always sad to see stuff getting taken away, but I think this probably makes sense as a place to target taking away a little bit of stuff. and then put back in other places. Because it definitely was true as well that for Blood Decay you would often have A-Bomb Limb granting you useless Bone Shield charges. I don't know how often for Unholy or Frost you would get Runic Corruptions or Rhymes that you didn't need, but I imagine that was a little bit less that you got them that you didn't need, and a little bit more that it just maybe you were pushing those buttons too often for Blizzard's liking in your Rune Weapon or in your A-Bomb Limbs. Rune of the Apocalypse has been updated. The war effect is now going to give you much more damage taken increase and duration. Pestilence's damage has been increased by 500%. Famine effect has been buffed as well, 2 to 5%, and death effect has been buffed from 1 to 5% as well. So they've really tried to put some more power into Rune of the Apocalypse. I don't know if anybody's taken something other than Rune of the Fallen Crusader for a long time, at least among like two-handed DKs. Maybe that's ignorant, but that last few times I've played any DPS or Blood DKs, it's always just been Fallen Crusader, so I imagine they're trying to make some other stuff competitive. Cleaving Strikes now also retains the bonus effects for being within your D&D for 4 seconds when leaving its area. That's really nice. So now you will be still cleaving with your Heart Strike, with your Obliterate or whatever, with your Scourge Strike? I think it's Scourge Strike that cleaves for Unholy as well. You'll be cleaving with all those, even if you have to dance outside of your D&D. And I wonder if this means it also persists for 4 seconds after D&D goes away. That would be large as well. That would be very large for smoothing out the playstyle, making it feel a little bit less bad, the way that D&D interacts with the spec. Icebound Fortitude cooldown reduced by 60 seconds. Veteran of Third War now grants 20% stamina for 1 rank, instead of 10% for 2 ranks. All right. I wonder if this was 10/20 or if it was 5/10. I actually don't remember. Icy Talons now increases attack speed by 6% for 1 rank as well. So again, we're getting talent points back on these things. We're getting talent points back on AMS and Chains of Ice. So we're up 4 talent points so far. Unholy Bond now increases the effectiveness of Runeforge effects by 20%. Now 1 rank was 2. Now you didn't always take this depending on what build you were playing of Blood in particular. I think you pretty much always did for the other specs. But yeah, this is now a 5th talent point back. Assimilation now reduces the cooldown of AMS by 30 seconds and no longer increase runic power when absorbing damage. Suppression now grants an additional 6% damage reduction to area of effects when you suffer a loss of control effect. Blood Scent Leech increased to 5%, moved to gate 3. Blood Draw now gives you a 10% DR and reduces Death Strike cost for 8 seconds by 10 when falling below 30 health. Now also a 1 rank talent and moved to left capstone position. So it looks like they're trying to make the capstones defensive now rather than like offensive, because we've got, I guess you're going to have A-Bomb Limb as one of them. You're going to have Null Magic and Vestigial Shell as one of them. And you're going to have Blood Draw as one of them. And those are all defensive or utility. I mean, I guess A-Bomb Limb is going to be kind of the default damage one now. But you're not going to have like Soul Reaper and Power Rune Weapon down there anymore. This seems quite powerful, though. Blood Draw, the problem with Blood Draw for Blood Decay, the reason that it wasn't a point you often... It was a point you often shaved on Blood Decay, was that it just procced so often, and giving yourself a small shield was not a particularly powerful defensive benefit on a spec like Blood Decay, where you're cycling through your health bar so frequently anyways. But adding a damage reduction effect to it is definitely making it much more appealing for Blood Decay. And, I mean, of course, this entire thing is huge for DPS DKs as well. This is now a very potent defensive option for them. It already was quite good. Unholy Ground has been moved. Sacrificial Pact is now a choice node with Enfeeble. Pretty much always took Enfeeble, I think, this expansion anyways. Last time I remember taking Sac Pact was... or using Sacrificial Pact was on the Jailer before the current talent system. Runic Attenuation has been moved as well. Soul Reaper has been moved. Okay, so Soul Reaper's been moved, not removed. It's been removed after Unholy Blonde, or Death's Reach. Unholy Blonde, a new hairstyle customization available for DKs, probably. The following talents have been removed. Might of Thessarian, Merciless Strikes, and Clenching Grasp. I think these were just stat benefits, like crit or whatever, avoidance type things, I think. All right, then we also have some Unholy changes. So we know there's changes coming for Frost DK as well, but I guess they're not in this build. Or maybe they were already in. I don't remember. We have a new talent. We have a bunch of new talents. Okay, so we have 4 new talents. The first one is Doomed Bidding. Consuming Sudden Doom calls upon a Magus of the Dead to assist you for 8 seconds, and this is a choice against Summon Gargoyle. Ghoulish Frenzy is now available in the second gate, replacing Unholy Command. Raise A-Bomb is a new talent that summons an abomination to attack nearby enemies, applying Festering Wound with its melee attacks, and infecting all nearby enemies with Virulent Plague. 90-second CD, replaces Army of the Dead. So I assume this means that if you take this, you have this instead of Army, rather than this is now what you get instead. Like, you can have Raise A-Bomb or Army of the Dead, not Raise A-Bomb or nothing, I think. Foul Infections says your diseases deal 10% more damage and have a 5% increased chance to crit. Menacing Magus says your Magus of the Dead Shadow Bolt now fires a volley of Shadow Bolts at up to 4 nearby enemies. Epidemic and Outbreak are now baseline. Love it. Anytime there are things like Epidemic and Outbreak where they're talent options, you get in this spot that one thing that has felt so bad in Dragonflight for some specs. You kill Kazara the Hellforged, right, in Aberrus. You kill the dragon at the start of the dungeon. You're like, cool, I killed the dragon. Then you have like 10 minutes of trash, and if you don't change your talents, you don't have a button you can press that does AoE, and you're just like, what are we doing here? There are a lot of different specs for this to be true, right? You're playing like Destro Lock and you don't have Rain of Fire. You're playing BM Hunter and you don't have Multi-Shot, right? You're playing Unholy and you don't have Epidemic and Outbreak. So that is, I think, a good change. I think one they should make for pretty much every spec. Talents that make your AoE better, make your AoE good are, I think, totally fine, but baseline being able to AoE without it feeling awful, right, should be a default thing. Sudden Doom is now learned in Gate 1, directly after Scourge Strike, and also causes your next Death Coil or Epidemic to critically strike. It's no longer RPPM, and has been instead updated to have a 25% chance on auto attacks to proc, with built-in bad luck protection to provide a more consistent proc. So that's interesting. That's kind of like Subtlety Rogue's energy proc thing, maybe. Cool. No longer RPPM as well. I think that'll be really good for the way Sudden Doom works, to have a nice, smooth influx of these procs over the course. And 25% on auto attacks is quite high. You know, obviously you're a pretty slow auto attacker as Unholy, but you're still looking at getting one of these every, 9 seconds or so. Army of the Dead cooldown reduced to 3 minutes, was 8 minutes. Apocalypse cooldown reduced to 45, was 90. DT 45 was 60. Vile Contagion 45 was 90. Festermite now functions like Iron Fur, allowing multiple instances to overlap. Okay, so Festermite was this buff you'd get where when you popped a wound, you would get a bunch of strength. And there was a huge skill testing component to this where you would, really try and build up to 20 instantly, because that was the amount you could get to. And then it would run out, and gaining new stacks wouldn't cause it to refresh its duration. And so depending on how you played around this, particularly in like big M+ pulls, you could kind of screw up, right? And you could accidentally generate one towards the end of a previous pull, and then go into your new pull, pop a bunch of wounds, get up 20 stacks, and then it immediately expires, and you're kind of missing out on a bunch of damage. This was kind of fun to be aware of and to master. And it was one of those things where most cases you were kind of fine ignoring it as well, but making it function like Iron Fur is going to remove a lot of that skill expression, but is also going to make it a lot less punishing for people, and there will certainly still be a lot of gameplay to this spec, so I think this is probably a good change. Ruptured Viscera is no longer a choice node with Magus of the Dead. Ebon Fever is no longer a choice node with Bursting Sores, and is available directly after Bursting Sores, updated to also affect Frost Fever and Blood Plague if Super Strain is talented. Unholy Blight's been moved to Gate 1, and the following talents have been removed: Replenishing Wounds, Army of the Damned, Unholy Command, and Feasting Strike. I haven't done too much Unholy DK in the past expansion, so I don't really have a great take on these changes here. A bunch of talents removed and stuff going baseline means you're probably getting enough extra points to be able to take some good stuff easily. So it's probably good changes to the layout of the tree, but I haven't actually looked at how the tree looks, so that's something that could certainly actually be not good, depending on how the points shake out. So that will be something to keep an eye on. Demon Hunter, Felsguard. Fix some issues with Burning Blade's Demon Surge not interacting with other talents. Demonic Intensity tooltip has been updated. Activating meta greatly empowers several abilities. Demon Surge damage increased by 10% for each time it previously triggered while your demon form is active. So you're really being incentivized to make sure you're getting all of your demon surges because the last one is going to do the most damage. Fix some issues. Consuming Fire now correctly functions with other MOR talents. And Havoc says Violent Transformation also resets the CD of Immo in addition to its current effect. Evoker. Time Spiral is now a choice node with Spatial Paradox for all 3 Evoker specializations available in the class tree. Spatial Paradox has been nerfed to a 3-minute CD from 2 minutes. Huge change to increase the ability to play specs that aren't augmentation in high-end raid content. One of the things that was really tough about trying to play like a dev evoker on Mythic Progression this tier was you would look at it and you'd be like, oh, our dev evoker is maybe contributing less. They're contributing less damage than the Aug evoker, almost for sure. If your Aug evoker is like doing the right stuff, which is annoying to do, that's another can of worms. But even if that weren't true, even if the dev evoker was doing the same damage or slightly more, you're giving up Black Attunement. You're giving up a bunch of free globals that are low cost to be used for utility and healing. You're giving up Spatial Paradox. You're giving up Wurnstone. These are just some... You're giving up the Obsidian Scales Black Attunement increase. These are all such huge things to lose for Dev Evoker, and the only thing Dev Evoker really gained relative to Aug is Deep Breath being something you could kind of press for movement or Breaking Roots or whatever on Tindral, that kind of thing, without it costing you anything, unlike Breath of Eons. This is, I think, a really good step. Making Spatial Paradox something for all 3 Evoker specs, I think, is huge. Prez and Dev both suffered from lack of utility-itis. Now, a lot of their utility in some fights was Time Spiral. But if anything, this means now that, there will be some fights where the second, the third Evoker are bringing some relevant utility. This tier we saw, and last tier we would have, and the tier before we would have, and every tier in the game's history, if tuning existed and Aug Evoker existed like it currently did, you would play 2 Aug Evokers just off of the power of the spec in high-end content. But this is really good baseline utility for the class to add, and it's really good to take away Spatial from Aug as well as a special thing. And again, I think in particular, targeting stuff from Augmentation Evoker, like Spatial Paradox and like Wurnstone, is a really good way to nerf the spec when it's being used in the hyper min-max high-end kind of content, because Augmentation is a really great and fun addition to the game for a lot of casual players that enjoy a supportive playstyle, enjoy a chill, relaxed playstyle. Those players are not pressing Spatial Paradox anyways. I've been in Keystones with those players. I've been that player in some Keystones. They're not pressing Spatial Paradox. So that is a nice way of kind of taking some of that power out of Augmentation, adding a lot of power to Dev and Prez in high-end coordinated content without kneecapping Aug in the ways that it is currently fun for people. New talent for Aug. Arcane Reach. The range of your helpful magics is increased by 5 yards, located in Spatial Paradox's previous location. So this is going to be really nice. You're going to have much less randomly being out of range for Prescience, randomly being out of range for Ebonmite Extendos, all that kind of stuff. So that's really nice for Augmentation Evoker. You still will have to be within 25 yards of the boss, just like Dev, but Augmentation is definitely going to have an easier time, a nice quality of life increase for the spec of this. So I endorse this as well. I think this is a good talent. I would endorse just buffing baseline Evoker range to 30 from 25, and then letting Prez go up to 35, and making this talent make Aug's friendly stuff go up to 35 as well. I think that just a little bit more would be really nice for Evoker. It can still be less than the usual casters, I guess. Even that I'm not sold on, but a little bit more would be really nice. Prez. Temporal Compression reduces the cast time of power spells by 10% per stack, was 5%. All right, a little buff there. Nothing major. Not a spec or class that's been hugely focused on in this build. I've seen a lot of comments as well where people are like looking at the size of patch notes for one spec versus another. This is just the way that alpha works. The way that alpha works is any given build they'll often ship like entire huge changes to one spec, to one class, to that kind of thing all at once. And then other little tweaks will be coming in. But this doesn't mean that there's not big reworks coming for other specs that either aren't mentioned or that do get a small note. That is just the way that alpha works, is that Unlike in retail, where it would be bad, and whenever it happens, it's bad, and we should complain about it for a spec to be ignored for a month. In alpha, that's just totally fine. That's normal. That is how this cycle works because, they don't have the game isn't live right now. There aren't a bunch of survival hunters suffering because their set bonus is still not an upgrade to equip on alpha. That's a problem on live. That's something that wouldn't be a problem on alpha if a spec was just unplayable for a month, right? Like, obviously, it kind of sucks if you're one of those people. It maybe increases the chances that something goes live that's bad because you had less time for testing, but realistically, like, that is the workflow for these things. So I've seen a couple of those comments below these videos, and I think that's worth giving a little bit of context there. Okay, Mage. We have a little bit of nerf here to Arcane Soul. Okay, not a nerf. Arcane Soul no longer claims to reduce Arcane Barrage's mana cost, so I guess it probably already wasn't, but it now no longer claims to. Glorious Incandescent now procs on Fire Blast instead of Phoenix Flames as well. Fire. Lit Fuse is now applied by Fire Blast instead of Phoenix Flames. Living Bomb applications are slightly desynced to minimize overlapping. The damage has been increased by 100%, damage not increase in PvP combat. Kindling now benefits from Flame Strike. Flame Strike crits now reduce the remaining cooldown of combustion by 0.2 seconds for each crit up to 1 second. So in 5 target AoE if you're in combustion, or probably 9 target, 10 target AoE. Actually, probably a little bit more to be getting 5 crits. Does Flame Strike roll a crit on everything all at once, or does it roll each damage individually? I don't know. These are the mysteries. I think it does it on each Flame Strike rather than each target, so in that case, 5 targets is all you need to be getting the full value out of this. Unleash Inferno's non-Flame Strike damage bonus has been increased to 60%, and the Flame Strike damage bonus increased to 35%. So moving a little bit of the rotation back into Fire Blast away from Phoenix Flames, and also trying really hard to move Flame Strike into being fully synced into the class kit, because a lot of times there are these fire builds where it's like, you could Flame Strike, but half of your synergies don't actually function with it, and so they're trying to fix that, which I think is a good thing to do if you want to encourage people to ever press Flame Strike. Monk. Brewmaster. All right, we got some new brew talents. Elixir of Determination. When you fall below 40% health, gain and absorb for 100% of recently purified damage, or a minimum of 20% of your max HP, cannot occur more than once every 15 seconds. So, right off the bat, this is not a lot of time. 15 seconds, this thing could be proccing 4 times a minute if it's proccing on CD. Falling below 40% health on Brewmaster as well is something that happens quite a lot in high-end content, right? Brewmaster, historically, you kind of used to be this tank spec where it's like, I'm just always at 70% health, right? The dot and the hot are balanced, and I'm here, and any incoming damage isn't actually going to hit me for very much initially, and then I'm going to get a dot, and maybe I'll purify out of it, or I'll Celestial Brew these days and absorb it, and that will be the way that the spec plays. But in practice, you do often, because you have such a small maximum health pool, falling below 40% of it is something that I think will happen. This will probably trigger pretty reliably in most forms of content. And minimum 20% of your max HP, I mean, that's not nothing. Brewmaster's max HP pool is pretty small, but the value they get from each point of health that they are given as an absorb is very high. So those two things cancel out pretty nicely. And 100% of recently purified damage as well, depending on what recently means in this case. That could be huge. I mean, you could be in situations where you're just getting blasted and you're pressing Purify frequently, and you're purifying off, 50% of your max HP or something like that, bang, you drop below 40% health, you're topped again, and this can happen once every 15 seconds. That sounds massive to me. Strike at Dawn says Rising Sun Kick grants a stack of Elusive Brawler, making it so that a button... Rising Sun Kick is a weird button in Brewmaster right now, where it's kind of pure offense button. The Aberrus set bonus tried to change that, and it looks like they're kind of baking some of that in here, where it's just, okay, RSK is now something that you can press as part of your rotation, and it does give you some defensive benefit as well, rather than just being pure damn. One with the Wind says you have a 10% chance to not reset your Elusive Brawler stacks on a successful dodge. August Blessing says when you would be healed above maximum health, you instead convert an amount equal to 40% of your crit chance to a heal over time effect. All right. That seems really big. I mean... Particularly, Brewmaster, you press a Celestial Brew or whatever, you're going to get topped while that Celestial Brew is active, and now all of a sudden you've got a nice hot on yourself. The hot interacts really naturally with Stagger as well, as you're then taking more damage. This seems really sick. You already are scaling crit as a Brewmaster as well because of Celestial Fortune, I think is the name of the passive, where you have a chance to basically heal for more when you get healed based on your crit. This seems like a really strong effect for Brewmaster as well. Depending on the content, but I mean, Brewmasters do get over... Even in content where Brewmasters are dying, 20 seconds before they're dying, they're often getting overhealed. I think this is sick. Yeah, this seems really, really cool. Ox Stance. Casting Purifying Brew grants charges or stacks of Ox Stance based on stagger level. When you take damage that is greater than 60% of your current health, a charge is consumed to increase the amount you stagger. All right, so making you a little bit more one-shot protectioned. Is what Ox Stance is going to do. And not just one-shot protection, but like Mythic Jailer swings his mace and deals 300% of your health as damage there. And now you will be able to stagger enough of that to live the one-shot initially, which that's the good news. Then you have a massive stagger. That's the bad news. The Jailer's going to auto-attack you again 2 seconds later. That's the second bit of bad news, but at least it's something. Black Ox Adept says Rising Sun Kick grants a stack of Ox Stance. So this is something where, depending on the content you're doing, Ox Stance and stacks of it may not be particularly useful for you, right? Like, you may never be taking damage up front greater than 60% of your current health. But again, if it's pre-mitigation values, which I assume it is, that happens on... if you're doing a +5 key and a fortified mob auto attacks you, you're gonna consume an Ox Stance charge, I think. So that seems good. Again, as long as this is pre-mitigation value, not post stagger, not post mitigation, which I assume it would be. Heightened Guard says Ox Stance will now trigger when an attack is larger than 50% of your current health. Okay, so making it trigger a little bit more often, which actually is maybe a bad thing. If you are using all your Ox Stance charges anyways already, you'd want them to be applied to the bigger hits. And so this is something you will only... I suspect this will be one of those talent points, actually, that you should probably never take. But maybe. Cheese Surgeon Call to Arms are no longer a choice talent. Anvil and Stave has been updated. Each time you dodge or an enemy misses, you reduce the remaining cooldown on your brews by 0.5 or 1 second. Effect reduced for each recent melee attacker instead of having an ICD. All right, that's nice. Having the ICD was really weird on this effect, because if you were fighting a boss, for instance, that had a 1.6 second swing timer, you could dodge every other attack, for instance, and be getting full value on Anvil and Stave. But if the boss had a 1.4 second swing timer, then all of a sudden, if you're dodging every other attack, you're only getting value out of like 2 out of every 3 dodges on Anvil and Stave. So that was something that you had to... That was weird. So I think giving it an ICD, or taking the ICD off and instead coming up with this way to make it not OP in AoE is really clever. Improved Invoke New Zhao, the Black Ox, has been updated. While New Zhao is active, Purifying Brew increases the damage of New Zhao's next stomp based on stagger level. The damage is split between all enemies. This was based on Purified Stagger. Okay, cool. So now you have a little bit of gameplay where it's like, okay, I want to make sure that I purify... First of all, I want to make sure I don't double press Purifying Brew, which you already generally shouldn't. And then, yeah, if you get to high stagger and press Purifying Brew, which you already generally should play Purifying Brew that way, or, of course, pressing it to make sure you're not capping on charges, then New Zhao's next stomp is gonna be good. Depending on how much damage this does, this could be sick. This could be a way to kind of bring back that old Brewmaster feel of, if I'm taking a lot of damage, my New Zhao can do big damn. They've also removed Healing Elixir, Clash, which has been moved to the class tree, Graceful Exit, Bone Dust Brew, Bountiful Brew, and Attenuation. So the whole Bone Dust stuff gone from Brewmaster. Windwalker. Memory of the Monastery is a new talent that says Tiger Palm's chance to activate Blackout Kick is increased by 15%, and Consuming Teachers in the Monastery grants you 1% haste for 5 seconds equal to the amount of stacks consumed. Okay. One thing I'll note for Windwalker is they found a way to make haste feel pretty good now, so all of these effects that do stuff with haste now are good, which is sick. Windwalker has been finally, I would say, like, understood in War Within, and it's not this weird spec where like half of the talents don't really do anything or interact with it properly because the spec just didn't use haste. Well, now it does. Now it's like, it's not just like, oh, haste is good with Serenity or whatever. It's like, oh, haste is actually a fundamental stat that I feel in my rotation that is good. So that's phenomenal. Cool new talent. Revolving Whirl now additionally gives you 5 seconds of cooldown reduction on Whirling Dragon Punch. Fury of Zhuen now increases crit chance, was haste, and invokes Zhuen for 10 seconds, was 8. Fix an issue that caused Jade Ignition's damage to be reduced during Storm Earth and Fire. Now, Storm Earth and Fire was probably the single buggiest ability over the course of its existence in WoW. I think every patch there's been some Storm Earth and Fire bug, and I'm sure that at least one of them will make it live in War Within, but it won't be this one. And Sky Touch has been removed. That is... this Sky Touch, Sky Reach before it, has been a long, controversial Windwalker talent. And I think the experiment has played out. I'm glad to see them taking it away. Priest, Voidweaver. Void Blast base Insanity gen has been reduced, and Depth of Shadow's chance to summon a Shadow Fiend has been reduced. So a little bit of nerfs to Voidweaver. Nothing huge. Again, not final tuning or anything. Just something where they looked at it and they were like, okay, let's just tune this down a little bit for this week's build. Rogue. New talent, Shadowheart. Leech increased by 3% while stealth. Now, of course, Rogue, depending on the spec, you count as stealth for at least some, but maybe a lot of the time. So that will be Leech that affects then as well. Acrobatic Strikes has been redesigned. Auto attacks increase auto attack damage and movement speed by 1% for 3 seconds, stacking up to 10%. Developers note, Acrobatic Strikes no longer increases the range of melee attacks. We are revisiting increased melee range talents across the game, and most are being removed. Default melee range has increased since those talents were originally created, allowing specs with increased range to attack from well outside where it appears they should be able to. Yeah, I think it makes sense to not have some specs have long arms and some specs have short arms. I do think they should look at the melee range, though, and maybe consider just giving everybody an extra yard or two of range to smooth things out, especially with the prevalence of like relatively small hit boss mobs in M+, and relatively high densities of swirlies around your feet. I think giving melee just a tiny bit more playing room would help make this go down a little bit easier. Cut to the Chase has been removed from Assassination to baseline alt specs, triggering from Envenom, Dispatch, and Eviscerate. Vanish's guaranteed stealth duration is now 1.5 seconds from 3 in PvP. Tight Spender now reduces the energy cost of finishing removes by 6%, was 10. Subterfuge is now 2 points, and the effect duration is 3 or 6 seconds, so that's -1 talent point. Some talents have moved locations. Without a Trace has been removed from Subtlety to Class in Capstone location, replacing Shadow Dance. Night Stalker's been removed. Assassination. New talent, Rapid Injection. Envenom deals 10% increased damage while Envenom's effect is active, so giving you a little bit of that kind of eradication playstyle where you want to make sure that you're pressing Envenom every so often and not pressing it too early, or making sure you're pressing it when you may need to let your rotation breathe a little bit to make sure you're getting the full value of this. If you don't want to press Envenom with 3 seconds left on your previous Envenom's effect, if you're also then going to be starved for the next little while, because then your next Envenom might not be within your window. Serrated Bone Spike's been redesigned. It's a passive that gives you Serrated Bone Spikes every 30 seconds, stacking up to 3. Rupture spends a stack to embed a Bone Spike in its target, which deals physical damage and bleed damage every 3 seconds until the target dies or leaves combat, refunds a stack when the target dies, and generates 1 combo point plus 1 additional per active Bone Spike. Sick. So you're getting some of that old Bone Spike playstyle, but it's put passively on Rupture. That sounds like it's actually going to be really fun for Assassination in M+. And if you go into a pull, you could have 3 Bone Spikes, right? And you could put your 3 Bone Spikes out, then you get another charge, you could have a 4th Bone Spike out, and then as stuff is dying, you're getting it back, you're putting it on a new target, you're filling up your combo points instantly. That sounds sick. That sounds fun. Bone Spike's initial damage has been reduced, and dot has been reduced as well from the previous, active version. Improved Garrote's damage has been increased to 6 seconds, but Indiscriminate Carnage effect has been reduced to 6 seconds, so it's making those two last the same amount of time. Kingsbane damage bonus per poison application now has a stated cap at 1,000% from 50 stacks, was 1,980% at 99 stacks. The base damage has been increased by 6%. It was originally intended to be uncapped, but abilities and talents introduced in Dragonflight allowed players to reach its previously unreachable hidden cap. Increasing or removing the cap in the current environment would reinforce poor gameplay outcomes and continue to constrain talent options. So a lower cap is being introduced with the intention of having Kingsbane remain a valuable component of any build that includes it, but not by being required as every build's all-important main character. And Sepsis has been removed. All right. Outlaw. Ace grants 4 combo points when triggered, was 5. Main Gauche's damage, the mastery, has been increased by 24%. Adrenaline mastery for Outlaw has often been a very bad stat. Buffing its damage may help with that. Maybe. I mean, it certainly helps. Adrenaline Rush has been updated. No longer increases GCD recovery rate by 25% while active. This was always a very powerful hidden part of AR, was that it gave you a 0.8 second GCD instead of a 1 second GCD while it was active. Just really sped things up. Now increases GCD recovery rate equal to your haste while active up to 25%. Okay, so they're really trying to take a look at specs like Outlaw and Windwalker, where haste is a bad stat or a stat that's pretty uninteresting, and give you something for your haste. So your haste now will make your AR do what it used to do if you have at least 25% haste. Energy regeneration is now being increased by less as well in Adrenaline Rush, which does also add some more value to haste a little bit as well. But, I mean, this is a nerf to Adrenaline Rush. Updated here means nerfed. But nerfed maybe in such a way to make haste an interesting stat. We'll see. Count the Odds effect now has base chance 10% and duration 8 seconds, but no longer doubled while stealthed. Okay, so they're making it a lot simpler, making it a lot less, I guess, punishing to kind of screw up your stealth windows because you're not also going to be griefing your Count the Odds. But it is certainly going to be less. The jackpots in your opener are going to be a lot lower. Underhanded Upper Hand no longer affects Slice and Dice duration and no longer grants 3 seconds of Subterfuge duration and stealth ability use. Crackshot's dispatch effectiveness has been reduced to 50%. Thief's versatility now gives you less versatility. Some talents have been moved locations, and Sepsis has been removed. Subtlety. Premeditation has been redesigned. After entering stealth, your next combo point generating ability generates full combo points. Invigorating Shadow Dust now reduces cooldowns by 10 or 20 seconds, was 15 to 30, so they're nerfing that. Shadow Dance has been moved to the Subtlety talent tree from the class tree. Shadow Focus now reduced cost by 5%, and some talents have moved locations. So a little bit of I like this idea on Premed to make it just give you full combo points every time you enter stealth on your next combo point generating ability. Going to make sure that you enter stealth at 0 combo points as well now. Hellcaller Warlock. Seeds of Their Demise has been redesigned. Blackened Soul damage increased by 30%. When Blackened Soul deals damage, you have a chance to gain Ritual of Ruin or Tormented Crescendo. Malevolence, Wither, and Seeds icons have been updated. Demo. You now have a 35% chance, was a 100% chance, to generate a demonic core from your summoned Dreadstalkers when they fade. They are really, really tuning down the amount of demonic cores you get from Demonology. I am a little bit worried because every Demo lock I know thinks this is going to make the spec a lot less fun for them. Maybe there's another set of players for whom this is going to make it more fun that I just don't hear from, but so far I have only seen Demo locks that are not planning to really play Demonology unless it's obviously OP and they have to next expansion as a result. So I hope Blizzard knows what they're doing here, and there will be something fun about the Demo playstyle, because demonic cores, getting demon bolts, moving around, getting 2 demonic cores back to back and just blasting demon bolts into things. That was fun. Hopefully there's something new fun for Demo. I don't know. This is a change I'm very skeptical of. Destro. Devastation. Increases the crit chance of your destruction spells by 5%. Emberstorm. Increases the damage done by your fire spells by 4% and cast time of Incinerate by 20% if you put 2 points into it. Decimating Bolt is a new talent. This is a Covenant ability. Hurl bolts of decimating magic at your target, dealing shadow damage. Increase the damage of your next 3 Incinerates by 40%. Decimating Bolt's damage and the bonus to Incinerate both increase as your target's health decreases. So a little bit of an execute there. Summoner's Embrace increases the damage dealt by your spells and your demon by 3%. Ruin has been redesigned to give you crit damage of Destro spells by 10% for 2 points. Inferno has been redesigned. Rain of Fire damage is increased by 20%, and its Soul Shard cost is reduced by 1. So definitely still something you'll play in AoE, but really quite different than the current version. Decimation has been redesigned. Your Incinerate and Conflagrate casts on targets that have 35% or less health reduce the cooldown of Soulfire by 5 seconds and reduce its cast time by 40% for 10 seconds. So trying to make like a execute Soulfire rotation. Interesting. Chaos Incarnate has been redesigned. Chaos Bolt, Rain of Fire, and Shadowburn always gain 70% of the maximum benefit from your Mastery Chaotic Energies. Interesting. Does this mean there's no RNG to it? Or does this mean that it's 70 to 100% now? I assume this means like just always 70, because it says always 70. So yeah, you're going to lose that kind of iconic damage variance of Destro with that mastery, but you know, 70% maximum benefit instead of 0 to 100 is that's a buff as well. So that's more damage. Chaos Bolt's been removed from Destro's spec tree and is now baseline, +1 talent point. Conflag, Backdraft have been moved. Roaring Blaze and Improved Conflagrate have been moved. Ruin's been moved. And Avatar of Destruction and Chaosbringer have been removed. So early count here makes me think that this is going to actually be unlike some of the other, like unlike the Unholy tree, where my initial impression was like, oh, we're getting talent points. Unlike the DK class tree, where my impression was like, oh, we're getting talent points. I think you're losing talent points here, because you're going to need to put 2 points into Ember Storm. You're going to need to put a point into Devastation, right? You're going to need to put a point into Summoner's Embrace. You're getting back 2 points off of these things being removed. You're getting back 1 point off of Chaos Bolt being removed. But if you want to take this stuff, I don't know. It seems like neutral at best. Maybe it'll be more tight on your talent points, the new Destro tree. Finally, we have some UI and accessibility changes. Improve some clarity while enchanting items. There's a cursor highlight that can be mousing over, that'll show when mousing over items that can be enchanted by current enchantment. Dimming of non-enchantable items, and animations when an item has been enchanted. Cool. Updates to many world map items, including icons, including rare elite, caves, teleporters, Great Vault, catalyst converter, dig sites, pet battles, dungeon, and raid. Checkboxes for tracking have been added to the quest log for easier management. Characters on the character select screen are now directly clickable within the scene. The group manager has been updated with new art and feature improvements, including additional options to restrict group pings, easier access to both world and unit raid markers, UI panel reorganized so related options are together in sections, added options previously only found in character portrait dropdown, and health bars have been updated with a visualization that shows the percentage of temporary max health that is depleted. Interesting. Cool. Cool little changes there to the UI and accessibility. All right, those are the patch notes for this week's build. Hope you've enjoyed this video. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. Let me know what you think about the changes they made to your spec if you were one of the ones adjusted today. My initial impressions, I guess, are Brewmaster stuff seems cool. DK Class Tree stuff seems cool. Unholy stuff, I don't have as strong of an opinion about, but seems probably mostly cool. Rogue stuff also seems cool. I love the Bone Spike idea. I haven't played with it, but that sounds really sick. That sounds fun. I love Assassination, and this seems like a pretty fun playstyle for it as well. That seems really cool. Warlock, I don't know what's happening here. This seems, especially here, this seems awfully suspicious. Let me know what you think in the comments below as well, though. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.